Hi, Clay County. We're starting a little bit early today. The family is out and about, enjoying the still summer weather at a friend's house at a pool. So I thought I'd get one of these in before they got home, and then I could have some time to spend with the kids before dinner. And so we're going to do this now. And let me tell you, today's is this one's going to make some people mad, and I'm kind of happy about that. So we're going to get into page 290 here. And this one is the introduction of Darwin, and I really want to cover some good stuff here. I want to do it in a brief amount of time as possible, but I don't want to leave anything out. So we're gonna get right to it. This is section 10.2, and so they're getting right into Darwin. And one of the things that I find kind of amusing in a way is that when they talk about Darwin's book, Origin of Species, they speak of it as if that's the full title, and it's not, and it kind of hides the purpose for why he wrote the book, what he was really looking for. The full title of Origin of Species is On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. See, Darwin was looking for evidence that would prove that white people were superior to all other kinds of people, that we were the epitome of evolutionary ideas or evolutionary forces, and so we were superior, especially to the black man. We were superior to the darker skinned races. In fact, the lighter your skin was, the higher you were as a species, the more evolved you were as a species. And a lot of people don't know that because the public schools won't teach that. That the Origin of Species was originally intended as a very racist, segregationist type book. And that's part of why Hitler was so enamored with it. He would promote evolution in all of his schools. He would, in fact, he was such a purist on evolution. Anybody that came up with a different kind of evolution than what Darwin did, he would burn those books to keep Charles Darwin's idea pure, because Darwin's version of evolution was intended to be racist. That was a huge thrust or primary point of the Origin of Species book. It was the favored races, or the superiority of white man. And I, for one, think racism is one of the dumbest things man's ever come up with. I think racism is utterly stupid. I say it all the time. I tell my kids in my class, my students in my class, how stupid it is. And anybody tries to be racist around me, they get an earful because it's dumb. I believe that all humans are created equal, and I'm going to stand by that till my dying days. So Stephen says, yes, Darwin absolutely had racist hypotheses, and have folks ever thought of what the implication is in the Homo sapiens allegedly arising out of Africa? It's a great question, something for a lot of people to think about. So, and then he goes on to say, folks should read the story of Adabanga. I hope I'm saying that right. And the New York Zoo. He was a pygmy, but he was displayed as oh yes, I remember. He was displayed as an inferior primitive man, and Odabanga was a black man. I remember reading that. It's been a long time, Stephen, so thank you for bringing that back to my memory. Very powerful. But anyway, let's get into the textbook here. And they start off with a paragraph at the top here, talking about, would you like to sail around the world, or maybe that make you seasick? And then he talked about how Charles Darwin was on the Beagle, and he took Lyell's principles of geology with him wherever he went, and it really shaped his thinking. And okay, great. Some little factoids here. Over on the left, there's a couple of standards, some of the state standards from Florida, and one of them is SC 912L15.15, and it says, describe how mutation and genetic recombination increase genetic variation. Now here's an interesting thing about that. They have to prove that actually happens. They can't just sit there and assume that genetic recombination and mutation drive genetic variation. They don't talk in these textbooks. They don't talk in the state standards. They don't. It's hard to find where they'll be honest about this. But when you look at the way that genetic variation allegedly comes about through mutation, you get into how many times there is detrimental mutation and how many times there is neutral mutation, where a genetic mutation doesn't really do anything. It doesn't manifest in any way compared to the alleged beneficial. And really, when you get into the beneficial mutations, it's usually a loss of information, not a gain. And it's usually only beneficial in a very specific context, not in an overall way. It's not like gaining a new thing, like gaining wings. They've never shown genetically how wings could be gained in a creature, a type of creature that doesn't have them. They've never done that. The fruit fly experiment that they did a while back, they already had wings. The wings became bifurcated. It was actually bad for the flies. The fruit flies were still fruit flies. The divided wings did not help them. It was detrimental. Same thing for E. coli bacteria. Same thing for a number of bacteria who have become resistant to antibiotics. They lost information. They lost the ability to interact with the medicine. And so in that context, the context of like penicillin or whatever, they were capable of surviving in that environment. But in a general sense, it actually made them weaker. And so they don't tell you that. They don't give any of that information. They just assert that mutation and genetic recombination are the driving force for change in a population. And then they lump it in with adaptation, which isn't even close. The definition of adaptation is based on the idea of genetic information that already exists. And so we have to separate those two. Adaptation has nothing to do with new material. It's material that already exists. And so when we talk about genetic mutation, genetic mutation must be the driving force for the change in populations. And if you can show that genetic mutation can't be, then the whole house of cards comes falling down. And they can't show that genetic mutation is a driving force to get us from rocks to man, because the statistical analysis doesn't work when you get into the amino acids and you get into the formation of proteins, and then you get into the formation of the actual DNA strands and the RNA strands and all of that, and then you get into the way that the alleles combine and recombine and how mistakes are made and so mutation happens. It just doesn't work. They don't have enough time for the amount of alleged beneficial mutations to take place to account for all of the complexity and diversity of life here on Earth. It doesn't work. All right, so let's continue on here. It says, Darwin, shown in figure 2.1, was struck by the variation of traits among similar species. Hold on here, I'm going to tell my phone sound off, or I'm going to get a lot of beeping going on here. Was struck by the variation of traits among similar species that he observed in all his travels. In biology, variation is the difference in physical traits. Guys, this is important. This is not genotype. This is back to that phenotype. Darwin did not have the idea of genes to draw on. He only had, let's look at it and see how these things look to be alike. He's judging according to appearance. And those of you who are paying attention enough and understand enough what I'm talking about know exactly what I'm referring to and know why that's a bad thing, right? Don't judge according to appearance, judge right judgment. And he wasn't doing that. He was judging according to phenotype. He was just judging according to the way things looked. And it goes on to talk about the finches. Darwin noted that the species found on one island looked different from those on nearby islands, and that many of the island species look different from those on the nearest mainland. It talks about tortoises, and it talks about the finches. And I want to point out something here. The differences in Darwin's finches is less pronounced. When you look at it, the differences in the beaks of those finches is less pronounced than the differences in the various dog breeds. Now look at dogs. You got Chihuahuas, you've got Mastiffs, you've got Pugs, you've got Greyhounds. Look at the amount of variation within the dog breeds. They look like completely different animals in so many ways, and yet they're all the same species. He looked at the finches and assumed that they did not interbreed, and therefore declared that they were different species, that they were different kinds of animals in a way that required them to be defined as different species, on less differences than we see in the differences in dogs. And it is mind-boggling to me that we have that humanity has built this entire scientific model, or I don't even know if I should give it that much credit. This model, conceptual model, we'll go with that, on such small ephemeral data. Just something as that tiny as it is, that little of a difference. Suddenly these are different species, but dogs can be so different in their size and structure and whatnot, and they're all the same species. We understand that to be the same species. So, hold on, the wife's texting me here. Do the dishes. Yes, ma'am. I'll be on it as soon as I'm done here. So then at the very bottom, it says, these observations led Darwin to realize that species may somehow be able to adapt to their surroundings. An adaptation is a feature that allows an organism to better survive and reproduce in its environment. Adaptations lead to genetic change in a population over time. And I hit this in chapter 1. I talked about adaptations. Adaptations do not produce genetic change. They cannot provide genetic change. They are based on genetic information that's already there, and they do not lead to new information. Adaptations are a way that animal populations use existing genetic information. They have the coding already there. Those creatures are already being produced as a part of the population and have been for a long time, but they're a small part. And when the environment changes, that small part of the population becomes larger because in that particular context, they're able to survive better. And the one that had been dominant becomes less prevalent. It's still there. The genetic information is still there, still part of the population, but it becomes less prevalent because it doesn't have the survivability, and natural selection is weeding those out. And so the idea that adaptation has anything to do with transitions from one species to another, has anything to do with the genetic information, is totally bogus. Has no bearing whatsoever in reality. And I got to tell you, it's frustrating as all get out, because they are redefining terms beyond all semblance of words have meaning. We talked about it in my classes today. We were talking about language, and we were talking about how words have meanings, and the origins of words, and the Latin origins and the Greek origins of a lot of the English language. And we talked about the value of precise meanings of words, and how dangerous it would be if someone took control of the language. Very 1984, very dictatorial in the way that language could control a population, because language is the vehicle of thought. It's the way that we convey thought. And when they take control of the words like this, when they start changing the meanings through the textbooks, people need to realize it and fight back. And that's exactly what Science Freedom Florida is about standing up for the truth, the objective truth. And this is not the definition of adaptation. It has nothing to do with genetic change. It has no relation, there's no cause-effect relationship whatsoever between adaptation and this alleged genetic change over species. Just, it doesn't exist. So that is the page. I don't want to go beyond that, and of course I got to get the dishes done. So I'm going to stop there. Let's see here. Stephen says Hitler passed legislation which prevented interbreeding between Aryans and Jews and Negroes and others. Now, why would he want such a thing prevented? What presupposition would account for such an act? And of course, the answer is the eugenics of Darwin's evolution, the selection of favored races. Great point, Stephen. Thank you very much. Again, if you have any more questions, any points, any things you want to discuss, Feel free to comment on this. I'll see it and I will respond. Um, Guys, tomorrow is the election. Get out and vote. Ashley Gilhousen, Betsy Condon, Latanya Peterson. We need them. Please get in there. They're defenders of truth. They want truth, and they want our students in Clay County to be thinking objectively, to be thinking critically, to be able to reason properly, reason as individuals, and not be controlled, not be railroaded into believing a specific thing that the government wants us to believe. Come on, this is America, land of the free, home of the brave. And if we're going to stay that way, we got to fight back against people who are all about the people control, all about the power. And the other side, that's them. That's what they're about. Whatever else they say, that's what they're about. Seen it firsthand. I've had to experience it firsthand, and you guys got to get out and vote for these three ladies. Again, Ashley Gilhousen, Betsy Condon, Latanya Peterson. Please get out and vote tomorrow. Go to your precincts and get it done. And please share this. Get it out to as many people as you can. Knowledge is power. Information is power. And people need to be empowered by learning the truth and being able to make decisions, educated decisions based on the truth. So thanks again for watching, and keep on learning.